a while, I get excited because I am sure that I'm going to preach on things that matter to our neighborhood and community, but then I have an external proof that God really was calling me to preach on this. And so when I sat down this morning a day late to read the Gazette that arrived on my doorstep yesterday, I was both surprised and saddened to read the headline that says food stamps are more than double in Anne Arundel County. I was surprised because that's what I'm preaching on today, and I was saddened because it is the truth. Since the recession, the food stamp use has grown 162% in Anne Arundel County. And the piece that disturbed me here was that county-wide, just 3.6% of the population uses food stamps. But the people who use the stamps the most live in just 4 communities: Glen Burnie, Pasadena, parts of Annapolis, and Severn. Two-thirds of the assistance is distributed to those areas. So that makes what Severn's trying to do to fight hunger all the more important. There was a young family, a husband, a wife, and 2 children living in our neighborhoods, going to our schools, and subsisting on chicken hot dogs on white bread 5 days a week. Now think about that. Each chicken dog meal contains about 226 calories, half of which come from fat. There is some protein, calcium, and iron in hot dogs and chicken dogs, but these aren't a good source of vitamins. They contain enough salt to fill the adult serving 1/3 of the adult daily allowance. A hot dog in a bun earns a grade C or D on the nutritional scale. They may be inexpensive, but they are a meager foundational meal, especially for children. Thankfully, the food pantry supplemented this family's lunches with little hugs, beverages, and fruit. This may sound like a very small improvement, said the father, but this one improvement made it possible for the family to buy toilet paper without using their credit card. He praises the food pantry for helping the family to rise above their circumstances. In Anne Arundel County, there are more than 46,000 families, not people, 46,000 families who are food insecure. That means that there's been a 146% increase since 2006. Food insecure is a term used to describe the lack of available, safe, nutritious food. Now that lack, it can come from a lack of grocery stores in the neighborhood to shop, as it does in downtown Baltimore. It can come from a lack of transportation to bring the food home to your house. But most often it comes from a lack of money to buy the food. When children don't have the right nutrition, it slows their development and their ability to learn. When families don't have the right nutrition, it increases their susceptibility to diseases and to poor health outcomes like diabetes and heart conditions and childhood obesity. Food assistance ranks in the top 5 calls made to 211 Maryland, a helpline with the United Way. And even though Maryland is one of the wealthiest states in the United States, 1 in 6 families will experience food hardships. Now in our Severn neighborhood, we often don't see the hunger. You have to search the internet to discover that at our local school, the one closest here, Ridgeway, 19% of the lunches are free and reduced. At Severn Elementary, it increases to 30% of the meals that are free or reduced. And at Van Bocklin, just down the way on Reese Road, 85% of the meals are free or reduced. That's great, because at least they're getting lunch. What happens during the rest of the day? What happens on weekends? What happens in the summertime when school is out? Sitting in our church pews, especially for those of us who don't have children, we just don't see the hunger. We don't see hungry seniors either. There are several low-cost housing complexes in Odenton and 2 trailer parks in Severn where seniors are living. Alan Gant, the Vice President of the Christian Assistance Program and a member of this congregation, says that numerous seniors come to the food pantry and are very, very grateful for the food that gives them a boost to make it through the rest of the month. So today I'm asking you to see as if you were seeing with God's eyes. I'm asking you to respond the way that the prophets have taught us. Isaiah said that the best worship we could give God was to let the oppressed go free, to share bread with the hungry, to offer shelter to the homeless, and to clothe the naked. The prophet Micah answered the same worship question by saying that material offerings and extravagant gifts just don't please God as much as our ability to do good, to do justice, to love kindness, and to walk humbly with God. I'm urging you to respond the way Jesus taught us, to imitate Jesus' ministry and welcome strangers and give food and drink to the hungry and thirsty and clothing to the poor and visit the sick and imprisoned. Whenever we serve the least of these, our brothers and sisters, it's like we're serving Christ. You know, when the warm air masses that are close to the earth start to mix with the cold air masses that are higher in the atmosphere, and the winds begin to accelerate to 200 miles an hour, shredding trees, flipping cars, razing buildings, businesses, and schools, leaving the dead and dying moaning in the rubble, we are shocked and horrified. And we're suddenly shaken awake from our everyday trance. We're blown out of our protective numbness. And we're moved to post prayers and follow up with loved ones that may live in the area. And many of us don't just stop there. We put our prayers into action by donating to relief societies like UMCOR and the Red Cross. Some of us have worked other times through the years to have the skills that we can be called into service. And so there are people from our neighborhoods that are on the way to Oklahoma or already in Oklahoma working with the Red Cross and UMCOR and the other relief societies. And our 2 congregations, Severn and Delmont, are not waiting for the next disaster. In January, they already made flood buckets, and now we begin a new project working on layette sets so that the youngest victims in disasters can be given what they need to recover. It's so much easier to see the need and human pain in a 17-mile swath left by a violent tornado. But a child's hunger is often hidden to honor the family, and seniors stoically struggle discreetly. The only evidence of their pain and need is a sleepy nod and the lack of energy. We have to actively look with God's eyes and be the answers to their prayers. Knowing that hunger quietly steals away people's lives without setting off any alarms. we can set up practices that will protect our neighborhoods and communities. We can address justice issues and campaign for a livable wage. Maryland Hunger Solutions has calculated that it takes $32 an hour to support a family of 3. But what happens if there's only one wage earner, like a single parent and 2 children? The $32 an hour is more than 4 times the Maryland minimum wage of $7.25. We can assist people through programs like food stamps and WIC and free and reduced lunches. And we can also start community gardens or accept food stamps at farmers markets. We can initiate a gleaning program that donates the produce left behind after the main harvest. Or we can get organized and support a food pantry like the one we support that's in Severn's basement. The CAP Christian Assistance Program Food Pantry served 146 families in April. That's 375 people, of which 153 were children. That's very close to our 2012 average of 150 households a month. The pantry draws from cash donations to buy frozen meats like chicken and to provide the clients with food vouchers so that they can get non-perishables like milk and eggs. The perishables like milk and eggs. Non-perishables come from the twice monthly shipments from Anne Arundel Food Bank in Millersville, from group donations like Scouting for Food, and from individual donations from the 12 other churches that support the food pantry. The Vermont Bakery Depot in Hillthorpe donated 100 to 150 loaves of bread a week. And all of this is not quite enough. They often fall short of rice, peanut butter, bread and jelly, mac and cheese, canned potatoes, and cereal. As much as 30% of the food that's dropped off already has passed its expiry date. And Alan says he's not giving that food out. He wouldn't give it to his families. And so he's not going to give it to his brothers and sisters in Christ, that food that was belonged to the dump. The greatest shortfall, though, is volunteers. Volunteers receive and verify the gifts. They pick and pack the groceries. They help load the goods into people's car. They track the needs. They record the services. They manage the programs. The pantry is always short of volunteers willing to work on a regular basis. And right now, the most critical need is for a registration person just 3 days a month. These volunteers are the embodiment of God's love. They not only make sure that the hungry get food, they make sure each client gets food for their soul as well. Prayer is often offered. Difficult private prayer requests are written down on cards and given to one of the local pastors. Bibles are given out, and everyone is invited to worship at one of the 13 supporting churches. Everyone is treated with compassion and is offered not just a hand out, but a hand up. The pantry volunteers instill that sense of hope that a better day is coming, and until then, no one has to walk alone. Each volunteer seems to do something so ordinary, but each is part of a God's bigger plan for justice and mercy. Connecting with something bigger than ourselves is what makes life beautiful, exciting, and purposeful. I'm so proud that Severn United Methodist Church has chosen to use their annual Strawberry Festival to support the CAP Food Pantry. Not only will they be bringing in much needed cash and food donations. They're going to be helping others in our community to see with God's eyes, to see the hunger and pain, and see that they too can be part of God's bigger plan for mercy and justice. We are in the transformation business. Now you might think that we're in the faith and worship business, is all you see is our reverence here. But our mission statement says we are in the business of making disciples of Christ for the transformation of the world. Our purpose for being is to exercise our faith and bring God's mercy and justice to this place at this time. James reminds us that if we just say, peace to you, and we send the hungry and naked away without food and clothing, then we have a hollow, useless faith. Thank God that the congregations of Delmont and Severn are alive with faith and can look at their neighbors through God's eyes and see the need. Our food pantry was serving a gentleman named Joe and his family of 4 every month for almost a year. And then suddenly, no more Joe. For about 6 months, nothing was heard from him. And then one day, he strolled in, lugging a great big bags of food. He bubbled with gratitude for the help that he received during his period of unemployment. And even though he'd moved away from the neighborhood, he came back to return and pay us back by donating groceries for others. Tears filled his eyes as he recounted what his family had endured and what and who they had become now. His life had been transformed. I see our congregation becoming stronger and healthier because we are trying to really see our neighbors and meet. And most of us understand that the church isn't just about being fed on Sundays. It's about taking that same love out into the world and feeding the bodies and souls of others. Each week, we close with the same phrase, and I hope that it always remains meaningful to you, because it's a profound promise when we acknowledge that our worship is over, but our service has just begun. Amen. Now that we greeted Charlie, I'd like to invite Charlie to come forward and tell us what it's like to be a volunteer at the food bank. Charlie is currently the president of CAP.
I just came from there. That's the reason I was late. I had to witness a brother in my men's group getting baptized. I told him I wouldn't miss it. But Pastor Wendy kind of worked it in her schedule to allow me to speak at the other church and this one. As you know, my name is Charlie Baldridge, but I haven't always been the president of CAP. That's a title I try not to use, because sometimes when I'm down with the volunteers, they'll be treating me like one of the other volunteers, and I like that because they change their whole demeanor when they say, "Oh, he's the president." You know, big deal. You know, I've been with this organization for well over 20 years. I started in the early 90s, but let me give you a little recap of my history. As a young man, I became a stock clerk for Giant Food, and I did that for 30 years. And I distinctly remember a conversation with my earthly father. He says, "Are you going to be doing this the rest of your life?" Well, he kind of understood the aches and pains of physical labor at my age now. I'm starting to learn that. He said, "Have you ever thought of being a manager?" And I said, "No, if I do that, I'll be in the management business, not the food business." But then I started growing in Christ, and along about the 90s, I had a mentor introduce me to CAP, and it was a sure fit. I mean, I was perfectly capable of hauling groceries like I've done it before, and I got more involved with it, and as my spirit grew, I realized that I'm doing it for the Lord now instead of a paycheck, and it's a perfect fit. I mean, over the years, I've adjusted my social schedule. vehicle purchases to make sure I have a truck big enough and heavy enough to haul what I need to haul. And also, I didn't mention this earlier, but I have a wife that we both worked for Giant Food, and she decided a long time ago that she should get into a better, a more fulfilling field. So she's a cardiovascular tech. And as she progressed in her pay scale, she started, I'm sorry, it breaks me up every time I think about it. And she's paying for it physically now because I could see it on her. She works 12-hour days, and you know, it kind of gets to be a bit much after a certain age. But she did that to allow me to retire so I could devote more time to CAP. And I'll be forever grateful for that. Sorry, I got off point. But this thing has been a part of me my whole life. Everybody knows Charlie as the food guy in my church and even my family. And like I said, the title of president kind of fell into me. I was the only one in the room who didn't raise his hand, but all of the people on the board raised their hand, and I guess I became it. But I'm really thankful for Brother Allen. You guys know him in this church. I hope you do. If you don't, get to know him. He has been a wonderful addition to CAP. He has implemented such management skills that it just blows me away, because I was lacking in that. I know the Lord always sometimes calls the equipped, that he equips the call sometimes. He's still working on me, but he has already worked on Alan, and Alan is a perfect fit for this. And he's taken us up to the next level. He's actually brought us into the 21st century with a laptop and everything. And I'm really grateful for his decision to come aboard after he retired from Giant, because he has Giant experience too. Don't ever think you can't appreciate it, because without all of us working together as one unit, we're all one body. And this has been a wonderful experience for me, and like I said, look in the bulletin, look up Alan, and see where you can fit in if you want to. Thank you.